Clark, and that you're listening to Human Design for Parents and Kids. And today I have a special guest with me, Jess Bubbico. She's an author and a speaker and a guide, and I'm so glad you're here. We're here to talk today about her adorable book that she has published about children with an emotional wave. And so without much further ado, I just want to introduce Jess. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes. So just for our listeners' sake, kind of tell us what you do, how you serve the world, how you show up. I know you wear a lot of different hats besides children's author. So yeah, tell us a little about you.
So my name is Jess Bubbico, as you said, and I would call myself a very multi-passionate entrepreneur. For those who, obviously this is a human design podcast, but for those who really understand the human design lingo, I am a 4/6 emotional manifestor. And so I am always creating new things and moving in new directions. But I would say for the purposes of this podcast, I do a lot with human design and the gene keys and really helping people understand who they are, how they make decisions for themselves. I do that through teaching live classes as well as doing chart readings, things like that. My background, where my training was in speech therapy. That's where I got my my start in my professional career. And so I've worked with kids throughout my life. I think my first job was working, obviously babysitting. I feel like a lot of kids did that.
Yeah.
And then every
Especially
other job.
like 80s kids, sorry.
Oh yeah, totally. Like all the babysitting, Babysitters Club, all of it. But I wrote a children's book, bringing in some of what it's not specifically about human design, but it's my experience from my own human design really led into the book and what it's about. And I think it's a great resource for parents who have an emotional wave themselves or have children with an emotional wave.
Which that pretty much covers everyone, right? Because like 50% of the world has a defined solar plexus. The statistics don't work out in my family. We have a family of 6 and 4 of us have a defined solar plexus and 2 of us don't. So
Yeah.
I wish it was a little more 50-50 some days, but I'm definitely learning how to be a surfer on those big waves. So instead of letting them knock me over. And so I talk a lot about in my podcast and on my Instagram about what to do if you're the person without the definition. But this is a great resource for, I really thought it's very much spoke to, all of my children who have that emotional experience happening to them, because it feels really big to them and kind of scary. Well, why don't you talk about that? I always feel silly. Yes, I have a lot of wisdom with an undefined solar plexus, but there's nothing like the personal experience of someone with a defined solar plexus to help kind of clarify for parents that maybe aren't familiar with what we were talking about. What's that big wave feel like for you inside your body and inside? And if you could kind of even tack us back to like when you were a child and what it felt like, how big it felt like then.
Totally. Well, I think this is awesome because you have the undefined solar plexus and mine is defined. And so I think this is actually a really cool conversation because like you just said, like it could feel big and it could feel scary. And so it's going to be very fun throughout this interview to see the different language that we might use because, I don't know what it feels like to not have one, but you know what it feels like to be in the presence of one, right? Like, I don't know what it feels like for people to hang out with me, but I can see their reaction to me, right?
Yeah.
Which might be one of many things. And so we can never fully capture too, I think, the energy of what's coming out of us or like who we are, just in the same way I've never seen my own nose except indirectly. So I think as we're talking about emotional waves, like whether you have one or you're somebody who doesn't have an emotional wave and you know somebody who has an emotional wave, it's just two different perspectives, which I think are equally important. So
sure. And just to piggyback on that, I mean, so I compare the wave to different waves in the ocean. There's like different types of waves that happen in the ocean. And just to piggyback on your perspective thing, that the person with the undefined solar plexus is like standing on the beach watching the ocean. Whereas I feel like the person with the defined solar plexus is kind of in the ocean, and the wave is just as much a part of their experience as everything else is. From like one of the big disagreements I've had with one of my children that has a defined solar plexus is that I don't consider feelings to be facts. I consider it to be like information, but I know that if I change my attitude about something, often my feelings will change. But for kids who haven't learned to detach a little bit from that emotional wave, their emotions are just as much a fact as telling you that the sky is blue or the grass is green. They're very much, it is a solid data point, and you can't really convince them differently. But it comes with some emotional maturity that they can start to separate a little bit from the experience. And so, yeah, anyway, that's been my
Totally.
observation anyway. But you're right. It's like, it is really two different perspectives. They're in the water, and I'm watching from the side, and sometimes the waves come and touch my feet, but they don't have to.
Totally. I love what you just said. So just talking about like my own experience of having an emotional wave, I really love what you just said, because this book, I didn't know that my emotions weren't facts when I was a kid. And I can see it now, like as an example, this morning, there was something that evoked a large emotional wave from me. And I was like, I'm just going to feel it, right? I did my own book process. And I'll talk about this in a second, but I was like,
Yeah,
I'm
I'd
just
love
going to
that.
feel it. And then I was able to see on the other side of it. So I think the challenge is a lot of people with an emotional wave have been taught to suppress it, to not
Mm,
feel it, because it sometimes I think makes other people who don't have an emotional wave, or people who are uncomfortable by their own emotional wave, uncomfortable. And
so
so
true.
therefore we've been taught like, don't feel it. And, there's been a few things that have happened in my own life this past week that have evoked big feelings of anger and frustration.
Mhm.
And for me, you know, I I used to not be okay with those things, but as you said, I see it as just information. I'm like, "Oh, this is showing me where my boundary is. This is
Right.
showing me where perhaps I have a belief that I need to look at." But when I can see it as information versus seeing it as wrong because maybe someone else didn't like my emotional wave, or didn't like how it felt to be near my emotional wave, or I didn't like how it felt to be in my emotional wave, or whatever it may have been, it's hard to um we can miss a very big opportunity to learn something about ourselves, which is what human design is about in the first place.
Right. And living according to our authenticity. And I want to also just clarify that I've grown a lot since I used to give that message to. I'm not the parent that says
Sure.
your feelings aren't facts, because I know that in the beginning of a wave, there's that it's like trying to stop a tsunami. Like, there is really no point in trying to stop the emotional wave once it's happening, and they aren't going to be able to have a clear conversation about it till it's over. So I have my new parenting approach is not to try. I used to spend a lot of energy trying to control them, because I was like, wait a minute. It's your expectations that are setting this off. Let's chill, like the channel gate 36 or whatever, and trying to coach them into not having them so often, because they get really upset sometimes. And I just want everybody to be happy. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
But yeah, some of it was my uncomfortableness with their anxiety about feeling out of control for a minute. And so I was trying to, help do some preventative stuff. So my parenting, what I would advise parents now, and what I do in my own home, is I just make sure it's safe for them to have a wave, no matter where we are. And I encourage them not to say or do anything while they're having one, because a lot of times when we're angry or really upset, especially if you're 5 or 6, like my youngest, you're apt to hit someone or break something when you're in the wave that later you're going to feel really bad about. So we just really go, your feelings are totally okay. Let's just try not to make any decisions while you're having one, including
Yeah.
don't go get revenge on your brother. Like,
Sure. Hmm.
like it's all about, like, let's find a way to make sure this feeling is expressed in the safest way possible. And then when it's
Yeah.
over, we can talk about what happened.
Totally. And listen, here's the thing. Like, I used to, when I first started my business and I had no idea I was a manifester, I would be like, just go out and do it. Like, just do it. And people would be like, I can't just do it. And then I'd be like, I'll just do it for you, and it's like when we learn better, we do better. And I
Yep.
think that, I said this, I was telling you before we started the podcast, I got caught in the rain with a friend this morning on our walk just before this call. And as she and I were talking, we were just talking about our life experiences and all that. Like, we are here, we're here to grow, we're here to learn. We're all on this big fat rocks floating in the middle of who knows what, just trying to figure it out, And I think we're here for evolution versus perfection. And I think that when it comes to an emotional wave, for me personally as a kid, I had big emotions. Like I always did. And they were sometimes explosive, or sometimes I had a big reaction going to school. There was my mom, we were talking about this weekend. For like a year, I was afraid of one of my teachers in preschool, and I wouldn't tell my parents why, but I would just throw up every day before I went to school. And eventually one day somebody got it out of me of like, what are you upset about? And I told them, and like, made sense in my little brain. And then they were able to help me work through it. But for me, it just was processed as like really big fear and anxiety and all these kinds of things. And what do? We go, it's okay, Jess, Mrs. So-and-so is here. Everything's going to be okay. Don't get yourself upset. And then of course, and that's not bad. It's not wrong that that's the way we handle it. But, then I'm like, okay, well, don't feel this. Well, probably somebody one day was just like, it's okay. What's wrong? And I was probably like, I'm afraid of this teacher because, and then we can work with it. So I think just coming back to what you said at the beginning, that emotions are information. And the more that we can it's just an energy that's moving through us. And like, you said about the tidal wave, I was thinking to myself, probably a universally relevant example would be a fart or a burp. Right? Like, what happens when you
are
don't
totally
let it
a
out?
children's author if you're willing to talk about farts on a podcast.
Yes. Like if you don't let it out and you don't move it, it's just going to be sitting there. And then what we end up doing as human beings is it's like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling this pressure in my stomach? And I shouldn't feel the pressure. And oh my gosh, why is it there? Oh, it hurts. Oh, and then, but don't feel it. Don't experience it. And again, this is not to shame anyone at all, because I've done all of these things to myself. I am sure other people in my life I've done this to at times when I was less conscious of it. But that's where I think, and part of why I wrote this book was to say, number one, the first message in the book is your feelings are okay. You are lovable, whether you have big emotions or little emotions or anything in between. You are perfect. Step two, like you said, create safe space to feel them. Create a safe space to just let it out. Like with myself this morning, I get to the point, I used to get so embarrassed when I was angry. And I'd be like, there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be angry, especially as a woman. You shouldn't be angry.
Right.
And now I'm like, no, I am mad and I am angry. And what I used to do is I used to just act on it, because emotions are a powerful force. Think about how many of us are led by emotion on a day-to-day basis. They are a powerful force. And if I am not careful with an emotional wave, like you said with your kids, they might go break their brother's favorite toy that just happened to also be the favorite toy that they liked playing with from their brother. And then they don't even realize they've now hurt themselves and the other person. Right. So, I think learning to work with it is just learning to acknowledge that it's there, learning to move it safely. In the book I recommend for kids, like move your body, shake, jump up and down, yell into a pillow, like get it out, because they only last 30 to 90 seconds. Like they don't last that long. And then you can decide to do with it something on the other side.
Mm-hmm. I love how you call it a powerful force too, just to go back with that, ocean analogy too. Like it is really beautiful to watch it. It's not like, I mean, it can, I think of tsunamis and how destructive they can be, but like, that's pretty rare. The ocean really just does so much for us as a collective. And I think the solar plexus does a lot for us as a collective too. It helps us to have a human experience here. If we didn't have any emotion, we would just be, I don't know what would be, it wouldn't feel quite as real and as authentic and as human. So I definitely have come to love the, like you said, there's really almost a power in the solar plexus. I mean, I know human design calls it a motor, but it is, like you said, energy and motion. And so in its raw form, it's not meant to be destructive at all. It's just moving energy. It's not. And so I love that your book talks about like reframing even I don't know, we kind of have a whole like group of judgments around feelings, especially like you said, for different genders. Men are not supposed to cry, and women are not supposed to get angry. And but in its some of the most endearing moments between my husband and I is when his eyes have sweat, and then because I see that he's having a real genuine reaction to what we're experiencing together. And without that, my kids, because of my undefined solar plexus, have accused me of not caring sometimes because I'm not showing a feeling. And that's absolutely nothing could be further than the truth. I just am trying to self-regulate because they're having a wave. So I
Totally.
have to watch that, because especially my one boy has the 55, and he really feels like if I'm not experiencing an emotion with him, that somehow my detachment means I don't care as much or something.
Yeah.
I do try to show a little peek of it every now and then in my eyes, so he knows that like I'm experiencing something, but I'm the parent and you can trust me to maintain myself in control while you can experience what you're experiencing. I'm going to be here for you, So,
So if you have an undefined solar plexus, keep a little spray bottle in your pocket so you can spray it in your eyeballs.
That's a great idea.
When you were talking, there's something that you just said that I think this is a great analogy to build on. I am grateful. I live right on the beach, and I live on the 15th floor. So I have this beautiful view of the ocean and of the waves, like you were talking about. And if when I think about it, when we go to the beach and we sit on the beach, I live in Florida, so this is doesn't happen very often, but I love being able to open my windows and not have it be 1,000,000 degrees in the wintertime on one of those nice days, and hear the ocean. And you think about how many people turn on ocean sounds at night to go to bed and turn on the sounds of the waves. And I've heard people describe with the emotional wave, the romantic nature of it, when you can really be in it with somebody and you can really be in the feeling with them. And it reminds me, I've been likening the emotional wave a lot to music, because if you've ever sat with, maybe one of the first times you and your partner got together and you felt love towards that person, you remember some song playing in the background that evokes an emotion for you, right? Or it evokes a feeling. And I think that when we are at a point in time where we're learning that the happy emotions and the sad emotions can be just as beautiful, in the same way that a song about heartbreak can be beautiful, in the same way that a song Happy by Pharrell can make you happy, And so I think that so much of this really is about learning not to judge it, because I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure.
I think a lot of people, when a sad emotion comes in or an angry emotion comes in, it can feel so intense because I can sit with somebody, just as an example, my best friend's partner has an emotional wave. She does not have an emotional wave.
Sure.
And I will watch the two of us. I see his wave go off, and I see her getting very uncomfortable, and I see her I'm just sitting there like I'm listening to Barry Manilow. I'm like, feel it, go for it. But I think that when you feel it so intense, if you feel it so intensely, it can be uncomfortable in your body.
Yeah, sure. So you want to know what I would like, maybe what I would say to kind of go with your analogy about the person with the undefined solar plexus is like there on any amplifier. I used to play in a band, and in the amplifier, there's you can turn the volume down. So I have complete control over all these knobs on my amplifier. What I don't have control over is who is sitting next to me, because that's how they plug their guitar into the jack there. So I can't control whose jack is plugged into me. I'm experimenting with it. So I have gotten better about saying, oh, is that my feeling or is that your feeling that we're having? Right? And so I can actually, in my family, I'm not that good in, I don't know, maybe I'm better at it with strangers. Anyway, because the pandemic is, one of the most beautiful things I have 7 undefined centers, and because I'm a 6'2" mental projector, and I have 3 of them completely open with no gates, and the solar plexus is one of them. And one of the things I noticed about shopping in public during the pandemic was because of the 6 feet space, I wasn't picking up everybody's energy. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I used to go through the store and then I don't know. I just suddenly know things about people like, oh, this, you walk by this couple and I'm like, oh, he's definitely like a control freak and she's scared of him. He can pick up her fear or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm shopping for groceries, but I'm also picking up all these emotions all around the store. And I'm just observing them and playing with it because there's nothing I'm planning to do about it anyway. But after the pandemic, I thought, well, so if I don't want to be plugged into someone, I could just take a few steps back, literally, physically, and break that aura connection